So, a much-needed disclaimer first. English isn't my first language, I'm Italian, so apologies in advance for any grammatical horror I may end up giving birth to while typing this down. This happened in the summer of 2007. It was told to me by the two girls who experienced it, who were friends of mine at the time, and also a couple. This is important for later. It all happened in central Italy, in Lazio, the region where Rome is, and I need to give some context about it. The area around Rome is full of hills. Most of that region is, and underneath many of these hills sit ancient Roman/pre-Christian catacombs. So many, in fact, that they're not even that big of a deal for the locals, and some of these catacombs even got converted into wine cellars or basements over the centuries. Some haven't. Again, this is important for later. Now, these two girls, which we'll call E and C, were in their early 20s, had been together for a year or so back then, and given how ludicrously expensive rents in Rome, had decided to try their luck finding a flat in one of the small towns around that area, on those hills I've mentioned. Mind you, those hills aren't ominous at all. If you've ever seen pictures from Tuscany, that's what they look like, which is rather lovely. And they did find a small apartment for rent in one of those towns, a renovated flat on the second floor of a much older house, which isn't surprising at all in that region, as many houses are centuries old and just get renovated from time to time. On the ground floor of that apartment, there were some neighbors, but they never got to see too much of them, a couple of apartments with old people living in them. There was also a very old sturdy wooden door, which was always closed and locked by a padlock, and when they asked the landlord where it led, he told them it was the door to some old cellar nobody really used anymore, and supposedly was connected to one of the catacombs I've mentioned earlier. Again, it's an ancient country, and such things don't come across as particularly weird to us. Neither it did to E and C, who just shrugged it off like, okay, makes sense. So E and C spent a few months in that town, not really bonding with anyone, mainly commuting from there to Rome and back to work, C, and study, E. However, being a homosexual couple in an old town full of old and bigoted people, they quickly started noticing how unwelcome they really were there. They'd go to the local store to buy food, and the clerk would ignore them on purpose. They'd find their mailbox emptied, and all of their mail scattered over the floor outside their apartment. They'd even bump into people riding scooters around town, passing them by and yelling, "God damn lesbians." In short, they didn't have the best time there, but they knew it was only a temporary solution, so they decided to just endure it all while waiting to move again. And yes, FYI, Italy is still majorly conservative on the topic of LGBTQ, even more so than now 16 years ago. Then, one morning, as she was stepping outside to go to the car and drive to Rome, E found something on the ground right in front of their flat's door. A mussel shell had been placed there, with a doused red candle in it, and judging by the mess it made, and how short the candle was by now, it had been burning for the whole night. Not knowing what to do with it, she picked up the shell with the candle and threw it in the garbage, together with all the wax she could scoop up from the floor. Another thing she noticed, when she finally set out to leave, was that door, the sturdy wooden door downstairs that had always been closed up to that point, wasn't locked anymore. The padlock was gone, and it was opened just by a crack, but she didn't really pay much attention to it right then. But then, things started happening. At first, it was an uneasy feeling. E and C would be in their living room, sitting on the couch, reading, chatting, watching a movie, and suddenly, they'd have this feeling like someone was watching them. Later on, it became more than that. They'd hear noises around the house, like someone knocking on the walls in another room, or the toilet flushing on its own, water taps turning on by themselves in the kitchen. Quickly, it became less than bearable. One night, as they were sleeping, they both woke up in the middle of the night hearing the footsteps of bare feet in their living room. They started listening. It felt like the footsteps were simply pacing around, and there was nothing else. No voices, no items being moved, just the sound of bare feet in their living room. After a while, C, feeling understandably scared, whispered, "What's that?" to E, and as she did, the footsteps stopped, as if noticing her voice in the silence of the apartment. They stopped, and a split second later, they started sprinting towards their bedroom. E grabbed C and turned her face away from the door, doing so herself, just moments before the footsteps came through their bedroom's door and stopped to the side of the bed. "Don't look, whatever happens now, don't look," E told C, and held her in her arms for the rest of the night, neither of them sleeping, just listening in for those footsteps to finally leave or whoever it was to do something, anything at all. But nothing happened. They spent the next 3 hours wide awake, in silence, until dawn came, and with that bit of sunlight finally shining through, E found the courage to turn around, and nothing was there. Another night, E, who was in university at the time, was up late studying in their living room as C was sleeping. Like I said before, it was summer, and the window in the living room was open. She wasn't facing it. The window was to her left as she was sitting at the table taking notes. Suddenly, she felt the hair at the back of her head stand and had that familiar feeling of being watched, so she instinctively turned to the window. She described what she saw as a completely pitch-black human-like figure perched on the windowsill, with no features on its face save for two very large orange glowing eyes, who just stood there motionless and stared at me. She couldn't tell me for how long she stared at it. She told me she felt completely paralyzed and helpless, and had the feeling that, had she tried to move or do anything, that thing would have lunged at her. Eventually, she couldn't hold it anymore, turned around and closed her eyes, took a long deep breath, and looked again, and it was gone. After that, they contacted their landlord and decided to leave for good. They did so within a week since that event. The last thing E noticed as they were finishing packing their things up and leaving was that that big wooden door, the one who had been left open ever since all of those events had begun, was now once again closed and locked shut with a padlock. I hope you enjoyed. It's been 14 years since I was told all of this, and ever since then I've never shared outside of conversations with a few trusted friends. I had been meaning to write it down eventually, but never got around to it. And no, sadly I don't know the name of the town where this all happened. I'm not in touch with E and C anymore, so I couldn't find out even if I wanted to. But knowing myself and what a massive dumbass I can be, I don't much mind not knowing, because I know I'd be tempted to go and take a look on my own, and that doesn't sound like it'd lead anywhere constructive. This took place a couple years ago, when I was just 13 or 14 years old. I was living in a 2-story house with my parents and older sister. For some quick context, you need to know our house's layout was a little different. All the bedrooms were upstairs, with the master bedroom being down a hallway that had railings on one side that gave clear view from the stairs and vice versa. Now it's around midnight when I just came out the bathroom. I decide that I'll go downstairs to the kitchen to grab a water bottle before I go to bed. As I approach the stairs, I notice all the lights downstairs were turned off. Before I had entered the bathroom, my mum was downstairs and all the lights were previously on. At the time, I was still scared of the dark, so I decide to just look down from the railing to make sure the coast is clear as I muster up the courage to go downstairs. Suddenly, I hear a woman talking quietly in a foreign language. She sounds like my mum, but not entirely. And although I'm not completely fluent in my native language, I can't decipher a single word being spoken. Even then, who would she be talking to? My dad is upstairs in their bedroom, and if she's on the phone, why call in the dark? Trying not to think too much of it, I just call out, "Mom?" The voice stops. I approach the stairs and take a few steps down, trying to get a better look as I call out again, "Mom!" "Sam," she finally speaks. "Mom, Mom, what are you doing? Where are you?" Although she still doesn't quite sound like my mom, I think nothing of it, and descend a few more steps to try and see her. "Sam, come downstairs," she calls urgently. Although confused, I take a few more steps. At this point, I'm halfway down the stairs. As I'm about to call out to her again, as I still see no sign of her, she says yet again, "Come downstairs," but with more urgency than before. However, literally simultaneously, I hear my actual mum talking from above me. The two voices overlapping, sounding almost exactly the same. I look towards the hallway and see the master bedroom lights shining from beneath the door, and a laugh from my dad following my real mum's words. I look back down the stairs with horror on my face, still seeing nothing but darkness. As I turn around to run back to my room, I hear the woman laughing, no longer sounding anything like my mother. I race back to my room safely and text my family. After confirming with my sister and parents, they all claimed to have been in their rooms at that moment. I firmly believe on that night, there was a djinn waiting for me in our kitchen. I had previous experiences with a female voice spirit talking to harassing me. I'm not sure if she was just trying to scare me with all these moments, or if she had something in mind planned. Either way, the situation frightened me so much, I got a verse from my holy book printed and attached to the front of my door to protect me from her and other spirits. It worked, and I was never bothered again. Shortly after we moved. I lived alone in a small house in a small town in New Zealand, far away from the biggest region, Auckland. This all happened around 6.5 years ago, so some parts may be altered as I can't vividly remember this incident, when quite frankly I should. This was one of the scariest incidents that had occurred in my lifetime, even until now. It all started when one morning I decided to open my front door to go and buy groceries I had forgotten to purchase from the local market that started around 8:30 a.m. every day, even on weekdays. Instead, I found the strangest thing waiting for me outside. Lying on the center on my doorstep was a small USB flash drive, so small that I nearly stepped on it. At first I was confused and took a second to look around if anyone was pranking me. You know how those teens are these days, I thought. But when the outside of my house was dead silent, the questions began to flood in my head. Who put that there? Was the obvious first thought. It was just a generic USB stick, no label or anything. No one would waste their time to walk up to my house, placing it on my doorstep, I thought. But that was exactly what had just happened. There was no way to know where it came from or who dropped it, or if they purposely did so for the sole purpose for someone curious and lacked common sense to plug it in. Well, I did what anyone else would do. I took it inside and thought it'd be smart to plug it into my computer. The device was full of pictures. In fact, nothing but pictures. Dozens of them, filling every tiny space the USB drive could hold. I then opened the first picture and clicked through all of them in order. The first few were just shots from around town, general places that I recognized and pass through sometimes when I'm taking my morning stroll around the park. The fourth image was taken in our town's busiest street. In the image, the street was full of people, but there was somebody in it that caught my attention immediately. Me. The image showed me in amongst the crowd, just minding my own business buying groceries for my BBQ a day ago. Well, at first I thought, this was a small town. Was it just a coincidence that I was in the picture? The fifth image had been taken on the same day. Again, it was taken in our town. Again, I was in it. The photographer was closer to me this time, a little too close, I thought. Whoever had taken these pictures of me, I hadn't noticed them at that time. Next came several more pictures of me in various locations around town. Then something more chilling. A photo of a house. My house. It was nighttime in that image, and the living room light was on. I clicked through the next image. It was another image of my house, this time taken even closer. Through the living room window, you could see me sitting on the couch on my phone. I could tell from the clothes I was wearing that it had been taken the night before, right after I'd taken a shower. I had no idea somebody had been outside watching me. I kept clicking through the images on the drive, photo after photo of me inside my house, taken from just outside my window. Because it was so light inside and so dark outside, I was totally unable to see that somebody was watching me from out there. I couldn't see them, but they could see me clear as day. They didn't even need to use the camera light. After 20 or so pictures of me just inside my house, there came a real curveball, an image taken from inside my hallway. The man or woman or whoever was taking these pictures of me had been inside my house the night before. There were photos of my living room, now lightless and empty, obviously taken after I'd gone to sleep. Photos of my kitchen, of my dining area, my stairwell, and several taken as the unknown figure ascended my stairs, towards where I was sleeping. My brain started to run wild with thoughts about who had been following me. Had I wronged someone in the past? Said something wrong to the wrong guy? Was this just some weirdo who decided to target me? Were they armed when they came to pay me a visit? Whatever the case, somebody had come inside my house at night and taken pictures of all my rooms, including my bedroom. The second to last picture was of me, fast asleep in bed, totally oblivious to the person in my home. The final image was just a handwritten note framed in close-up. The message simply read, "Never hide a spare key under your doormat. I have since moved house."